A key to the Arctic's oil riches lies hidden in Ohio. Anchorage, you working through 2 winters in the biting Arctic cold, roustabout spored 3 miles deep into the coastal plain of northeast Alaska in search of oil. In the spring of for more than 3 decades, the findings from the $40 million have been one of the oil industry's most closely guarded secrets. Outside of the oil, now the secret has become much more than a curiosity. The Trump administration, undoing decades of environmental protections, in the area, which is part of the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge and has long been believed to contain North America's. Anyone interested in drilling in the area urgently wants to know, was the well U the only one ever drilled there, U a dry hole or a potential gusher? No one will say officially, but the New York Times found an answer in clues hidden 4,000 miles from the Arctic tundra, in the archives of a Beaux-Arts-style courthouse in Cleveland. The discovery well was worthless, said Sidney B. Silverman, a retired lawyer who was involved in a long-since-forgotten lawsuit filed there in 1987. Mr. Silverman, who is now 86 and divides his time between Long Island and South Florida, reached that conclusion while representing shareholders of Standard Oil of Ohio as it was being acquired by British Petroleum. Both companies had, in merger documents, BP had placed only a nominal value on the potential reserves in the refuge, and Mr. Silverman and other lawyers suspected that Standard Oil's shareholders were about to be cheated. They quickly learned otherwise. BP allowed Mr. Silverman to conduct a confidential deposition about the well with a BP executive, David Jenkins. Reached by the time, Mr. Silverman, similarly, remembered being convinced that either there was no oil and gas there, or the oil couldn't be produced at an economic value. Some of the documents in the case are missing from the court file, perhaps lost over the decades. But in more than one, John Warden, a lawyer who represented BP, said that he had only dim memories of the case, but that the well results became a non-issue. Told of the time as Mr. Silverman hinted at the findings in a memoir he self-published 10 years ago, but has never before spoken out directly about what was said in the deposition. He said, "This is important for the whole country," he said. One dry hole does not necessarily mean there is no oil to be found, especially since some decades-old seismic tests indicate that the area may hold as much as 12 billion barrels worth. And knowledge of the area, knowing that information, would help you in an extremely competitive bid, said Larry Persily, a former federal gas official responsible for Alaska, who noted there had been billion-dollar lease sales in the state. While the well is all oil and gas development in the Arctic Refuge, or an expanse about the size of South Carolina that is home to caribou and other wildlife, has been a goal of Republicans in Congress and many Alaskans for a half-century. But efforts to open the refuge's coastal plain, known as the Foundered for years, as opponents argued that exploration would irreparably harm one of the country's largest pristine landscapes. Republicans saw an opening with the election of Donald J. Trump. In 2017, the exploratory well was drilled under an agreement among BP, Standard Oil, Chevron, and 2 Alaska Native corporations, created to improve economic conditions among the indigenous population. The deal also allowed, at a congressional hearing last week, Richard Glenn, an executive with the Arctic Slope Regional Corporation, one of the native partners, played down the data's significance. "You can't determine," the corporation declined to comment for this article, as did BP. Chevron said in a. Joe Balash, the Interior Department official overseeing the leasing efforts, told reporters in December that the potential oil riches should attract plenty of interest despite the enduring mystery surrounding the well U, a site known as a tight hole, an industry term for wells with confidential findings. "In the oil and gas industry, there's secrets, and then there's secrets," Mr. Balash said. "This is the tightest." Related video. Oil's drop in 2018 still haunts investors, provided by Bloomberg. A legal circus. A year after the exploratory well was completed, a fleet of lawyers descended upon the Cuyahoga County Courthouse in Cleveland. BP, which, the deal and the ensuing litigation led to a legal spectacle, with lawyers, executives, and bankers shuttling from London to New York, often on Concorde jetliners, and then on to Cleveland and California. The case generated. Eager to distinguish himself from the other lawyers, Mr. Silverman seized on the lack of detail in BP's offer about what had been found at the test well, known as KIC-1. In a filing, soon after, BP's lawyers let Mr. Silverman question Mr. Jenkins, the oil executive. The proceeding was Mr. Jenkins, who is 80, lives near London and still works in the oil industry, said he had found a notation about the meeting in his 1987 appointment book. He did not remember. Mr. Jenkins holds out the possibility that there is oil in the refuge, but not where the Mr. Silverman, who ultimately agreed to a settlement, said he had been satisfied by what he learned during the deposition. I assure you right now that if that property were valuable, if it had any value, I would not have agreed to that merger. Mr. Silverman and the other lawyers in the offer price and BP stock warrants for Standard Oil shareholders, allowing them to potentially share in future profits. Just as a settlement seemed imminent, lawyers for a large shareholder, the California Public Employees Retirement System, known as CalPERS, lodged a challenge, also asking whether the price reflected the drilling results. To allay those concerns, lawyers for CalPERS were allowed to see information about the well findings. Yeterios Apple. The case was over in about 3 months. Mr. Silverman, in the decades since, as the debate flared in Congress over whether to open the refuge to oil exploration, Mr. Silverman and others involved in the case quietly kept the secrets of the test well. To date, there has been no drilling in ANWR, Mr. Silverman wrote in his 2009 memoir, A Happy Life from Courtroom to Classroom. Environmentalists think their efforts have preserved the wilderness area, he wrote. I know better, keeping the secret. The oil companies drilling KIC-1 were so concerned about secrecy that, they even shipped the rock cuttings from the well out of Alaska. In 1980, after a 4-year legal battle, the sites reached a tentative agreement that would allow only a few state officials to see the findings. But the state wanted. In a conference room at BP's Anchorage offices, Dr. Myers said, he was allowed to comb through the information, which included geological and geophysical data from the well. He was not allowed. Since then, the state's files have remained locked away at the Alaska Oil and Gas Conservation Commission in Anchorage. To this day, proponents of opening the refuge to exploration have long cautioned that the KIC-1 findings are only one data point. While no other well. A year after KIC-1 was completed, Tenneco and several partners drilled a well off the coast about 7 miles to the northeast. The well was intended. Other wells have been drilled just west of the refuge, closer to the huge oil field at Prudhoe Bay that spurred Alaska's oil boom in the 1970s. Some have tapped into. Dr. Myers said that given new understanding of where oil reserves may be found, much of the focus on the refuge has shifted to the western side, away from the KIC-1 well. A 3D site. A full airing of the KIC-1 findings, though, could come if the Interior Department moves forward with selling leases. Under state rule. In the meantime, the secrecy surrounding the results and their location remains a source of gossip, rumor, and political intrigue. In February, Alaska's new Republican governor, Mike Dunleavy, fired Hollis French, a Democrat on state's Oil and Gas Conservation Commission. In a letter the month, at a disciplinary, another commissioner, Dan Seamount, said that after he concluded that Mr. French had divulged the data's location, in the dead of night we moved the information to somewhere more secure, fearing that many people wanted to get to the findings and that all it would take would be a bulldozer and 15 minutes. My policy is to tell no one where the data reside, not even what country it resides in, Mr. Seamount said. It is arguably the Henry Fountain reported from Anchorage, and Steve Etter from New York.
Raindrop, drop top smoking, no cooking the hot pot. Fucking on your bitch, yeah, that. Looking up, open the park pot.